Flying Cam, and welcome back to the 1999 Project. Earlier this week, I covered one of the movies that I was supposed to cover this week, The Green Mile, with Zach from Movie Fan Z, because quite simply, The Green Mile is a beast of a movie, and I couldn't just cover it in like a 5 minute chunk of one video. I need to dedicate an entire video to it. So shout out to Zach for joining me. It was a great conversation. Now we're on to the 99 Project episode proper. We're almost to the end of the year and it's not going to stop. So bear with me, folks. Buckle in, like, subscribe, do the thing. Let's get going. And kicking things off, with the exception of the Green Mile, which I've already covered, kicking off the things proper is a TV special. And it is a story that I love. Two pieces make it so. It's A Christmas Carol from 1999.
Merry Christmas, Bob. I'm gonna raise your salary.
Reawaken the spirit of Christmas with the most spectacular telling of Charles Dickens' magical story, A Christmas Carol.
I don't think I need to explain A Christmas Carol to you all. If you're watching this, you've probably heard of this story, read it, or watched it in some form. But this version was released on TNT, and it starred Patrick Stewart and Richard E. Grant. And it's A Christmas Carol. We all know why we're here. I think it's pretty much a curse at this point that I cover at least one version of A Christmas Carol on this channel every year. And if I had to cover one, I'm glad I covered this one because my favorite version is the one from 1951 starring Alastair Sim. But with that being said, though, this is creeping up into like a close second or third because this movie was way better than I was expecting. It really comes down to Patrick Stewart. He crushes it. I mean, it's Patrick Stewart, so of course he's going to crush. But here, I found a lot of subtlety and nuance that he brought to Ebenezer Scrooge that I did not find with Alastair Sim. And Sim is the number one. He's the GOAT of Ebenezer Scrooge. He's never going to be touched. But Patrick Stewart comes pretty close, and he makes it different enough to where he stands out. There's little scenes where he sees with the Ghost of Christmas Present Fred and his friends having their dinner party, and he reacts to the dinner conversation going on. He even tries to reach out for a cup to try and drink with everyone, but the cup gets snatched away. Him forgetting that they can't actually see him. It's a nice touch, and Patrick Stewart just excels at these little things that you don't pick up unless you're really looking for him. He shines like a diamond here. And like I've talked about in other places, A Christmas Carol is one of my favorite stories in all of media. It's the ultimate redemption story. It's hard to screw up a story like that, and it's especially hard to do well. And like I said, 51 version is my favorite, but this is a close second or third. I loved this thing very much. I mean, Stewart's great. Richard E. Grant is great as Bob Cratchit. Dominic West is great as Fred. There's these little things too that stand out to me. An example being that the dinner scene, like I just mentioned, but then you actually see Ebenezer getting a little choked up, seeing his old school and seeing his younger self and seeing the love of his life walk away from him. He even yells like, "Go after her!" Like he wants to make up for the things that he has done wrong. And of course, predictably, he nearly made me cry in the scene where he's like, "Can you please forgive me? I no longer want to be an old man left out in the cold." Why is this story so good, Charles Dickens, you master? This is getting an amazing grade from me, with the exception of maybe a couple of things I thought were a little too over the top, like the Ghost of Christmas Future basically being an 8 foot tall Dementor. The rest of the movie is just a work of art, and they gave this for free on TNT. Yeah, TV was different back then. But now we go from a TV special to an awards bait movie, and make no mistake, but it netted Michael Clark Duncan the Oscar. It's The Cider House Rules.
A story about how far we must travel.
Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, I do not know.
To find the place where we belong. The Cider House Rules.
The Cider House Rules was directed by Lasse Hallström, who would go on to direct movies like The 100-Foot Journey, severely underrated. Check that one out for yourself. And the movie starred Michael Caine, Tobey Maguire, and Charlize Theron. It tells the story of a little orphanage in the state of Maine that is run by a charismatic doctor, played by Michael Caine, and his assistant, played by Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire was dropped off at the orphanage when he was just a baby and was never adopted. He was never adopted by the doctor either, but the doctor basically sees him as his son. However, when Wilbur meets a girl, played by Charlize Theron, and her husband, played by Paul Rudd, I swear to God, Deadpool was right, that man does not age. Wilbur takes up an offer to go to their apple farm to see what the outside world is like. Then they call Tobey Maguire Wilbur? No, his name is Homer, like The Simpsons. Like what am I doing here? This is a movie that is notable because it netted Michael Caine an Oscar, usurping Michael Clarke Duncan for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars. And it's a tragedy that that indeed happened. But I went into this movie with as fair a perspective as possible. And the movie is very well made, but yeah, this was just, I did not care for this one at all. It does not help that this movie is infected with Weinstein syndrome, but you could just tell that the Weinstein syndrome was in deep. Like there was several moments of this movie where I go, that would never fly today. But overall, the movie, like I said, technically there's nothing wrong with it. All the acting is great. Michael Caine's good. Tobey Maguire is good. Charlize Theron is good. It looks nice. There's a nice score involved. But there's some parts of this movie that just turned me off. And the movie's 25 years old, so I can spoil it here. I feel like, why not? The movie has a subplot involving incest. Yes, really. Yeah, it's a subplot. It's not the main focus, but it's definitely there, and I was taken aback by it, the whole thing of it. Like even in '99, this just did not fly. And just thinking to myself, considering who produced this, I was going to ask who approved this. Now we know. But all told, the movie's not necessarily bad in terms of technical wise, and I guess in an objective sense, I can't give it a bad score, but subjectively, I just did not care for this one. It's pretty forgettable. It just feels like they were trying way too hard to get that Oscar. It's kind of like a Shakespeare in Love kind of situation right here. But now we pivot from Oscar bait to Tenacious D trying to be puppeteers. It's Cradle Will Rock.
When the storm breaks, the cradle will rock!
Cradle Will Rock.
Cradle Will Rock was directed by Tim Robbins. Yes, that Tim Robbins, Shawshank Redemption fame, that one. And he basically cashes in all of his favors that he has made with people that he's known in the business because this cast is loaded, including Hank Azaria, both the Cusacks, John and Joan, Carrie Elways, Philip Baker Hall, Bill Murray is in this too. It's stacked to the rafters. And it tells the story of how during the Great Depression there was a movement of basically government-funded theater programs and how there was supposed to be a leftist musical drama that was supposed to go on. However, the movie chronicles the attempts by many to put it on and the attempts to put a stop to it. Sorta, kinda. This cast is absolutely loaded, and the acting is predictably spot on, but I am struggling to remember what all happens in this movie. And the main problem is that there really is no quality control in terms of story. There's a lot going on here. Hank Azaria is a frustrated screenwriter. Emily Watson wants to break into show business. Bill Murray is a Republican puppeteer who is afraid that communists are going to steal his act, and he takes both Tenacious D members Jack Black and Kyle Gass under his respective wing as like ventriloquists. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, the stuff that I can remember as I'm filming this. There's a lot going on here. It feels like this was maybe meant to be an anthology film, and if it was, then it just didn't really come out that way. It's possible where you can do multiple stories like this in an anthology sense or in a non-anthology sense. But if this movie had been an anthology, it would have been way better. You could tell several stories, small stories, and then interconnect them by the end. But all told, this movie's pretty forgettable, and it's a bit of a shame because this cast is absolutely loaded, and Tim Robbins almost doesn't really know what to do with them. But now we go from Cradle Will Rock to Pain. Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo.
Rob Schneider.
I think there's been a mistake.
Did you say steak? Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo.
Oh, Deuce.
Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo was directed by Mike Mitchell, and it starred Rob Schneider as an aquarium cleaner. I was about to make a joke about how that is just a job made up in the movies. However, I just remembered that in my job we have an aquarium and a guy who cleans it once a week. So what do I know? But Schneider plays this aquarium cleaner who has no luck with the opposite sex until he meets a gigolo, a male stripper who makes bank doing it. He being the stripper, is going to Switzerland for 3 weeks and asks this pool aquarium cleaner who he only met about a week or so ago to look after his house, and predictably things go completely pear-shaped. So Deuce must become a gigolo himself in order to pay the bills and repair the house. I don't go out of my way to hate on Rob Schneider, but man, his output has just not been stellar. I have not been a fan of everyone in the Adam Sandler friend group. Kevin James is the best and Rob Schneider is the worst. I've already covered one David Spade film earlier this year, and that was terrible. And this was just as terrible. And the movie suffers from one very crucial factor. It's not funny. I chuckled maybe twice. One time when Eddie Griffin comes onto the movie as as a pimp, but he doesn't want to describe himself as a pimp. I mean, it worked for Charles Wright. He got an Intercontinental title run out of it, Mr. Griffin. Like, just embrace the label. He has some mildly funny lines, and then Deuce eventually in the film ends up taking this very tall girl out on a date, a girl so tall that her face is never shown on camera. I thought that was a nice visual gag. And actually, it's not two things, it's actually three. The third thing that I thought was mildly enjoyable was William Forsythe, who plays a cop who I guess wanted to be a gigolo, but never had the stuff for it. Anyway, he's over the top, and honestly, he brings an energy to it that is sorely lacking in the rest of this movie. This movie is pretty much Rob Schneider doing his thing. If you like it, great. If you don't, you're gonna hate this. I'm not a fan, so I hated this. A lot of jokes, basically him revolve falling over, preferably into a pool of water, getting himself into a situation where he cannot possibly escape out of, and just him being ugly. That's the humor, folks, and it is just not fun. I don't want to talk about this movie any longer than I have to. This movie is horrid. If you like this movie, God bless you, more power to you. It's not for me. But I pass it off to all of you. What did you think of any of the movies I've talked about? Let me know in the comments. I would love to read what you have to say. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.